time to have a conversation. So, so this panel really explores how older adults can move from becoming, people who are often studied to sort of active participants in the research process. And I'll start out with a bit of context on sort of why we're bringing this panel together. So often when we talk about climate change and aging, older adults are often framed primarily in terms of people who are more vulnerable, particularly to extreme heat, environmental risks, and we've talked a lot about that this morning, as well as health impacts. Now, while these concerns are very real, sometimes this framing can overlook what's equally important, which are the knowledge and experiences and the resources that older people can build into this space, especially when we're thinking about responding to climate change. So this panel is really about shifting that perspective. So through the Coalesce project, which stands for Championing Older Adults for Leadership in Environmental Sustainability and Climate Empowerment. Yes, it's a mouthful. So a wise person told me once, if you have the longest acronym, you'll get the grant. So, we've proven that to be correct. So we're really exploring here what it looks like for older adults to become active co-researchers. So shaping the research questions, contributing insights, and helping to inform how climate change really impacts their communities and their everyday lives. So this session, rather than it being formal with slides, it's going to be more sort of conversational and reflexive. So you'll hear short reflections from 3 intergenerational pairs of older adult co-researchers and students who've been working on different aspects of the Coalesce project. So I'll quickly introduce the panelists. So first, we've got, I'm just gonna scroll down here. We've got Tobias Gesso, is a co-researcher from Silver Harbor Center. So I just have to mention that all the older adult co-researchers here are from Silver Harbor Center in North Vancouver, a super awesome senior center. So Tobias is a retired technology consultant and brings a lot of experience around, the climate action kind of research through his kind of everyday lived experience. And Ruth is a super keen co-researcher, and she's very interested in the intergenerational perspective of this project. Anne Backhouse is also a co-researcher, a retired lawyer with a really strong interest in environmental sustainability and community engagement. So Anne is the one who's going to take it to the streets. She's said this many times. So today we also have a fantastic bunch of urban studies students. So because I'm cross-appointed, we bring that kind of urban studies lens to this space. So we've got Dana D'Souza, master's student in urban studies with a background in architecture and a really strong interest in how cities function across social and environmental scales. Surya Ajay is also a master's student, and her work focuses around kind of disaster resilience, heat vulnerability in urban spaces. And Claire Dreyfus, another master's student in urban studies, focuses on housing affordability, aging in place, especially in housing co-ops, which is quite interesting. So each of the pairs will speak for about 10 minutes, reflecting on the process. And finally, we'll move on to Dr. Stephen Shepherd. He is Professor Emeritus at UBC Urban Forestry, and whose work focuses on community engagement and climate action. So Stephen leads the Cool Hoods Champs, which is a really important and interesting part of the Coalesce project. There's a huge kind of activism component. So without further ado, I'll move on to our first pair, Anne and Surya, to begin talking about community climate observations.
Sure, I can start. Okay, I'm hoping this is okay because it's just a kind of testing. So, yes, thank you very much, May. It's a pleasure to be here and involved in this panel, but also very much in this research project. As May mentioned, I am a retired lawyer. I actually retired last summer, and that's when I noticed in the Silver Harbour newsletter they'd got this sort of recruitment for sort of co-researchers for this project. And for me, it was just like manna from heaven, really, because it was like it's a great transition for me into retirement, but also it is a subject that I feel very strongly about. It's something that I feel been very concerned about, sort of climate change and sort of what is happening, but also sort of like I had a very strong sense of helplessness, where sort of like wringing my hands in horror as I read all about it was a little bit hopeless, really. But just to actually be involved in something in just a small way was great, to be sort of active rather than passive. As you can tell from my accent, I wasn't born and brought up in Canada. I came from the UK in 2008 with my family, and we arrived in August, and it was raining. I don't know whether you remember that, raining in August. But since then, and one of the things what I'm talking about is the observations that I've had. Since then, of course, and I think everybody here will agree with this, that things have changed dramatically in terms of how we experience the climate, how we experience the weather, how we experience the environment. And it seems to me very much that it's accelerating in the last 8 to 10 years. It seems to have, events are sort of, more frequent, sort of more extreme, and the impact seems to be sort of more significant. The heat is something that I think we can all experience, that we've all experienced a lot. The heat in the summer used to be, I live in a 1950s house in North Vancouver. You could just open the windows in the summer. That's just not the case anymore. There's periods during the summer when it's just intolerable. I mean, for me, in my observation, sort of, we actually decamp downstairs into our basement where it's considerably cooler. Sort of, we actually go underground. Our dog, we have to lift her over the asphalt because otherwise she burns her paws. It seems to be something that's each year we break records. And one of the things that I noticed is that sort of going from North Vancouver, where we're surrounded by trees, you go downtown, and it's noticeably hotter down there with the asphalt, with the buildings, with the glass, which is like greenhouse, sort of the greenhouse effect that people have. And it is, the environment that people have and what they live in, and I know that's something that people are concerned about, sort of where they live, makes a huge difference as to how they experience the heat. Air quality, wildfires. I don't remember sort of actually being impacted by wildfires. Obviously, they've been happening until it was about 2017, 2018. And then now it seems to be every year there is something that's happening. There seems to be some period, it may be long or short, when you have that sort of, orange moon in the, that's actually the sun in the sky. And I have friends who are just housebound during this time because they cannot go out because it's just too unhealthy for them. And that seems to be something that's accelerating each year, that we have events. For myself, one of the most dramatic sort of observations of climate change I've had was in November 2021, when I was coming back from the Okanagan, having visited family with my husband and dog. And there was an atmospheric river, a term I'd never heard before, but is now in the common lexicon, of course. And we got caught in the atmospheric river. The Coquihalla was closed. The Highway 3, as we were driving through, that also closed. Highway 1 was closed. We ended up being stranded in Hope, and we slept in our car for 3 days in Hope. The people of Hope were fantastic, I might say. They were very incredible, incredibly generous of their time and helping everybody. But just like, when we were driving along Highway 3, the rain and the water was just pouring across the road. It was like being in a river. There were logs, there were rocks. It was very scary. It was very scary, like being in sort of like some kind of Hollywood disaster movie. And then as we were driving, sort of like, I think we'd gone past Hope, but we were sort of still trying to go. and we were stuck in traffic, and we were stuck on top of on a bridge above a river. And I said to my husband, I said, like, well, this is probably about the worst place that we could be stuck, because the river was just cascading down. I mean, to call it a raging torrent is not an over exaggeration. And even though it was pouring with rain, I wound my window down, because I thought, well, if we're going to end up in the river, we need to be able to get out of the car. I mean, in retrospect, if we had, it had collapsed and we'd sort of been plunged into the river, I suspect it'd probably be neither here nor there whether the window was open. But it was just the fact. It was just the fact that that was actually my thought processes, which wasn't a crazy thing to think. And in fact, we had a happy ending. We had a, good few days in hope, and we got home okay. But there were fatalities that night, and it's actually not in circumstances that crazily dissimilar to the ones that we found ourselves in, which is very sobering. In 2026, I feel that it's not a matter of whether or not there's going to be an extreme event. It seems, what is that event going to be? How severe is it going to be? And how badly is it going to impact us? Thank you.
Can you hear me? Oh, yes. So my background, so I'm from India. I've been in Vancouver for like 3 years now. So before coming here, I used to work, like my work was entirely in like emergency and like climate change, climate-induced disasters, mostly heat, which is like, yeah, it's in India, so it is like a common thing. It has been a common thing for years. You easily get like 42, 45, up to 50 degrees in Delhi. So the kind of warning when I told everyone that I'm coming to Canada, everyone was like, oh, it's going to be like so cold. How are you going to survive in the cold? And I'm like, yeah, I'll manage. But it was only like after coming here, I heard about the heat dome, and I'm like, okay, so I'm not going to let go of heat anytime soon. So that's how I started like researching and studying more about extreme heat, especially in like cities where heat is like relatively a new problem. So my research is mostly in like a social housing that's close to downtown East Side, looking at how people perceive heat and how they take what their experiences are, and also looking at their isolation and well-being. One of the things that is like very glaring for me throughout this is that how heat is like people just really, until it like hits, it's not taken seriously. So that is the place where a lot of the impacts and casualties happen. So it's like the awareness of people who are like not used to. There needs to be like lots of boosting in that. It was like interesting to see the differences, but also like similarities from back home and also in Vancouver, like how even back home, like the responses to heat is like it's you would think like people, once they're like very much used to heat, you take them seriously and be like, oh, I'll be prepared and all of that, but that's not what happens, sadly. It's just so I found heat to be like an interesting segue into like studying how urban areas get impacted in the climate crisis. And with regards to this project, I think like I also have like a very personal side for it. Both my parents are seniors, and despite living in a very sort of ecologically like vulnerable place, convincing them to take any kind of preparedness action is like very difficult. So I get like really relieved when Anne is like so excited and like very proactive in talking about things. I'm like, maybe you should talk to my parents as well. So I think that's sort of what I have to say. Is it good enough?
Yes. Thank
Yeah.
you, and Surya. So now we'll move on to Tobias and Claire, who will be speaking about co-designing climate resilience.
My journey to this project through Silver Harbor in North Vancouver, I will characterize as the Valley of Despair. I care for my spouse, Marcia, and we were in a pretty bad place. We'd been afflicted in our lives from a very peak experience of having raised our 3 children to be very competent members of society, and we thought that was a real peak for us. Our daughter, visually impaired, legally blind, had her master's degree in education and is teaching the blind throughout the province technology. And so we felt very proud of her and her experience. Our son graduated UBC as a software engineer, a nerd like his dad. I'm a computer scientist myself, master's in computer science, and I worked in complex systems all my life, or 40 years of my career. And then our youngest was not too interested in academics and liked his guitar because it attracted the opposite sex, and he was interested in that. And so he became a musician, and he's won a couple of Grammys and also a Juno just recently. So we felt on top of the world, and then we walked into a diagnosis, and things changed. And we're walking through that valley, and we found Silver Harbor as a place because we were isolated, not getting out much. And so it brought us to music first, and then theater, another experience where we ended up being in a social situation that improved our lives somewhat. And then we got into research, and we got involved in this study. And it basically took us out with people into the community, doing something purposeful, something meaningful. And so that really was an experience that brought us out of that valley of despair, back into society and back into doing something that we felt maybe would be productive for our children now, if we could just make a difference in terms of climate. So in the project itself, Coalesce, and the fact that we are co-designing, I look at myself as a co-researcher. I'm not an academic, but I do have some experience that extends beyond the lives of some of the people involved in the project, because I was born much earlier than they were, and I have experiences that I can relate that they can't relate to in terms of their experience. And I feel that that aspect of, I will call it epistemic justice, how people look at this feeling of whether quantitative data is more important than qualitative data, and does that old person's opinion matter, and those sorts of issues. Do we look at just, what the data is telling us in terms of, how things are going, or do we look at how people experience nature? And one of the things I recently learned from being involved in this study and looking at the research is that a walk in nature, as opposed to a walk in the city sidewalks, can improve your memory on a memory test by 20%. And that's in a recent book by Dr. Mark Berman called Brain and Nature. And so this idea of ecological neuroscience is very close to my heart, given dementia, given my experience with my wife, given that I have to not only look after my safety, but her safety. It gives me a passion for the topic. So I'm very, very grateful for the people to listen to what I have to say, and to you, and certainly to my partner, Claire, who works with me very patiently, because I have a lot of things to say, a lot of opinions. And I do need to be managed, so she gave me, no, well, she didn't give it to me. I found this device to help me deal with my nervous tension, and it's working. So, but that caregiver vigilance is really important. That caregiver vigilance gives us, the attention, the directed attention we need, but also we have to realize that not only that direct attention, but a restful attention, one that you'll retain for a longer period of time, is what we need. And since we're in the trough of the day, that restful attention becomes important. It's an attention that will stay with you. It's an attention we have in the wild, in nature. Things that you remember and experience in those conditions will stay with you longer. And so in that regard, I find that being involved as a co-designer gives me a certain dignity about what I'm doing. Marcia feels involved. It gives her a sense of purpose, which if you are experienced with dementia, you'll understand is so vital to her existence and happiness. So I'm very grateful.
Thanks. And I'm also very grateful to you, Toby, so thanks. Yeah, and I come from a background in housing, less environmental. I used to work for CMHC in innovation and partnerships, but and as May mentioned, I'm working at looking at how the social and built environment affects or supports aging in place in co-op housing. So I really did learn. I think you are still working on a lot of complex issues. I don't think you're not doing that anymore. So it's good to say, but I did learn a lot from you about kind of the environment and natural resources regarding like how it contributes to your well-being. And as you mentioned, just because you were brought up and you grew up in a different time. So I think it was good in that way, like our intergenerational kind of lens when we're working on the project was so important. So part of the process was doing a lit review and bring kind of different articles to the table, and we talk about, okay, is this important? Is this important? And it really expanded my understanding of aging and climate change and climate disaster and heat resilience specifically. And I also have like Alzheimer's and dementia in my family, so that was a kind of somewhere that we could relate. I used to work in a behavioral science lab working in specifically looking at dementia, so it kind of brought me back to kind of some older roots that I hadn't touched in a while. So that was super fascinating to kind of understand and look at also talking about the community-based interventions while doing our research, like the educational programs and the resources on heat mitigation, just like changing our mindset about climate change and how we need to go about our day in a different way, honestly, and not just because we're all aging, and we're all aging in place in a certain, everyone differently, and I think like my generation isn't really thinking about it, and in my work right now on co-ops, or in co-ops, I know that people of like 20s and 30s and 40s aren't thinking about it as much as people in their 50s and 60s, but why aren't we thinking about it? And climate and sustainability is really built into that. And I was looking at it in a sense of like design of the building. How could it be better designed so that we can mitigate climate disaster and better venting, better insulation, and better kind of community to talk about this. So that was really fascinating. And to talk about it, we're in phase 2 actually of the Coalesce program right now. And Tobias is in my group as well, and we're working with 3 others. They live in Mission. And it's kind of interesting because now you have sensors and it's measuring air quality. And so kind of CO2 and air particulates and stuff like that. And it's fascinating because we are looking at well-being, but Tobias kind of mentioned something about mental health and looking at it, maybe it gives you more anxiety. You're like, okay, why is it saying poor air quality when my windows are open and, I'm cooking, but I have the vent on and stuff like that. So that's also something we really have to think about. And kind of some points as well are right now, most people's, unless there's an issue with your sensor, everything's okay. It's saying, it's moderate to good air quality and stuff like that. But this project will go into the summer. So we think about what will it be like in the summer when you can't open your windows, kind of what you were talking about before, Anne, when there is potential wildfire smoke. And so, if there's not good air coming in, it will actually continue to just be poor air quality. And kind of something we spoke about in our meeting last week was, okay, let's all kind of go back, do a little bit of thinking, do a little bit of research and think, what are other kinds of mitigation strategies or solutions, whether that's technology or just behavior, which could help in the summer to mitigate kind of, air quality, poor air quality, instead of just, let's say, air purifiers or something. So we're thinking about that. I don't know if we've come up with anything yet, but, or maybe you have. Would you like to say? Okay, I'm going to pass it to you then for a sec.
Well, on that issue, Marcia and I were walking up Lynn Creek in Lynn Valley in the headwaters, and my thoughts immediately went to when it's 38 degrees, I'm coming here and I'm going to put, now I understand from this morning, my feet in the stream. That'll be good enough. But if it requires more of my body in the stream, I'll just put my body in the stream. And I would never be thinking as I walk along the path of, hey, there's a creek right there. That's a great cooling mechanism. So I thought, great, now instead of the mall and inside and not in nature, I'll go out in nature, I'll get cooled that way. And next thing you know, I'll be down at 30 foot jumping in the canyon.
Yeah, and that's really good. And that kind of speaks to, so we're going to talk about this next session. I hope everyone else has some ideas too, and I will also have some ideas by then. But that talks the education programs that you need. Let's say at Silver Harbor, perhaps that's happening, but at also other senior centers, or perhaps the government needs to put some stuff out too. I'm not too sure, but yeah, I think it's really interesting, and I'm not sure I'm seeing all those like climate mitigation strategies for aging adults in our current policy. Anyways, that's going a little off topic, but thanks so much. I'll pass it on to the next group.
Thanks so much. So now we have our final pair, Ruth and Dana, who will be talking about intergenerational climate engagement. So kind of following this conversation.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for staying awake. My name's Ruth. I'm 77, so I'm a senior. And to quote some famous actor, aging ain't for sissies. I feel everything so much more now. So why am I here? Pure and simple curiosity, and the more I hear, the more curious I get. In fact, I'm suffering from overload right now, and we're not even halfway through the conference. One of the bonuses of being involved in this project is that I get to hang out with young people who aren't family, which I like. And also I get exposed to a bit of technology, like with this sensor. That was quite the voyage of discovery, learning how to use it, and it still surprises me. Who am I? I've lived in a selection of climates. Grew up in northern England, so we just toughed it out. Lived in Israel, where it was really humid, and in Ontario, where everything happened within a day, and now here in BC. So I know in Ontario, to cope with the climate in Eastern Ontario, we relied on air conditioning, central heating, and cars. And the only time you experienced the climate was when you left your home or your office, but in between that and the car. So what have I noticed about the climate? Last winter, I see on my balcony in my high-rise apartment green all over the edges of the balcony. I've never seen that in 18 years because it's algae that grew because it was so warm. I now need, on the 7th floor, I now need insect screens because there are so many more flying objects trying to get in, which is a little awkward because I'm a senior, so climbing on step ladders is getting a little more awkward. I have fewer clothes because I have to spend more on linen and cotton so that I don't sweat so much. Is that too much information? I hope. I think some of the issues for seniors that I'm experiencing, as well as some of my neighbors and friends, is I think the biggest one is mobility, because we've heard a little bit about the ethics of ride-hailing companies, so that's a bit iffy. Driving is not a good idea as you're getting older and the cataracts are growing, so that's a bit restrictive. And you can almost guarantee if it's raining that you've just missed the bus. So the only recommendation I have is sort of a cultural change, which would be to make it automatic to check, especially in high rises, or even if you just know there's another senior around, to just check on them, make it a cultural norm to do that. And it's starting to happen on my floor, which is a relief. And my biggest hope for the future is you lot, the students who are investigating and creating far more than I could ever dream of. Thank you very, very much for the opportunity of participating.
Hello, everybody. Unlike Shreya and Claire, my work does not reside within climate change, but I think what binds us is that everybody lives under the same blue sky, and so climate change affects all of us, and so we're all able to speak about it because we all have lived experiences. My first experience with climate change specifically was when I was 7. The city that I grew up in, Mumbai, received almost like 1,000 millimeters of rain in 24 hours. It has been the highest that we've ever had rain fall in a day. I think like 1,100 people lost their lives, and everything was sort of not good. My mom didn't come home for 2 days because they were stuck in office. And that, as a 7-year-old, you sort of don't understand what's happening except that it's raining. Right now, I live in SFU housing. We don't have air conditioning. The apartment was 29 degrees yesterday, though it was 20 degrees outside, with all of the blinds down and all of the windows open. So living there in summer, I've been there 2 summers now, it's really bad. But you sort of see it around you, and it's not new. We've grown up. I've been here for less than 30 years. So for me, it's something that's always been happening. But then when you sort of get into discussions with Ruth and the other co-research that you work with, they're talking about how a few years ago you could see so much more birds and so many more butterflies, how the seasons didn't really overlap in the same sense that you had very distinctive snow days and very distinctive rain seasons, and now it's just everything muddled into one, and you don't know what you might be living that day. I think specifically my greatest takeaway from this project was that having grown up in India, our relationship with seniors is more hierarchical in the sense that you have to pay a certain type of respect and you're expected to pay that respect. But through this project, it's sort of breaking down that understanding that only some sections of the society have more knowledge than others, especially working with Ruth. It's sort of, every time we'd meet, she'd be like, oh my God, you're teaching me so much. And I'm like, no, you're teaching me so much. And so, it's a well-rounded experience where we're both sort of learning and we're both interested in different things, but they contribute towards the same thing. And that's my key takeaway, if I have one, that that learning is not just for you don't have to be in school to learn. And similarly, you don't have to be a professor in order to disseminate that information. So I love working with this project and working with Ruth especially. See.
Thanks so much.
I'll pay you later.
Thanks so much for those wonderful reflections. So now I'll pass on to Dr. Shepard, our discussant, to reflect on all of these interesting insights.
You get to sit down?
Yeah, I get to sit down for a bit.
Okay. Thank you, May, and thanks for all those interesting, powerful stories. I'm Stephen Shepard, and thank you, May, for inviting me here. So I'm kind of privileged to listen and interpret and maybe embellish a few of the thoughts here as I maybe start off to a wider conversation I think we're going to have that May will lead. So a pretty impressive set of sort of findings, if you like. Being a researcher, I think of findings, but it's, I think, more important, learnings and shareable stories. And some of the ones that really resonated for me were the power of these personal stories, the personal recollections, through a lifetime, whether it's shorter or longer. They're all equally powerful. They're all basically saying the same thing with a myriad examples, all related to climate and, of course, to everything else, because climate affects everything, which many people don't want to believe. So I think some of the things that particularly noted was, I think, Shreya, you talked about the difficulty of talking even to your own family, to across the generations, because of different viewpoints about seniors versus young people or middle-aged people. And I think, again, this is one of the good things, May, that you've introduced with this study, is getting these interrelationships and these co-research, cross-generational studies going on, which is quite unusual, certainly in my experience. And I think that's a powerful set of things to do that we can perhaps do in real life as well. Lots of meaningful sort of things for both research and also for getting into sort of action and some of the things that people can do about it, and getting out and talking to people and helping people. And I think one of you mentioned the need to set up sort of cultural norms that people look after other elderly people who may be vulnerable or have certain vulnerabilities. But I think we all have a variety of strengths and vulnerabilities. But that's important, and I think shifting cultural norms is, well, frankly, a probably important objective that very often we sort of leave for some future time. Some good discussion, I think, of the co-benefits of climate action, both for mental health, physical health, sort of meeting people, learning new things, and obviously trying to fix things for future generations. I think that's all pretty important. And I'm glad somebody mentioned climate policy and what governments could be doing to recognize these things a little more and more proactively than perhaps they've been doing. And then a few other things about, for example, the respect, I think respect for seniors with different sort of cultural frames for that, and we could probably use a bit more of that. But I think one of the things that really occurred to me in thinking about this session is the need to, I guess, harness this power that all of us, including myself, I'm now a senior, retired, proudly retired, Still trying to figure out what to do with it, but never mind. That'll be a lifelong problem, I imagine. But we do have examples of elders as leaders, and I think, again, the theme of this Coalesce project of sort of leadership and empowerment. And I've seen some amazing examples of that. In previous research at UBC, working with communities, many different communities, of sort of people's more retirees, older adults who are leaders and who are empowering people and who are influencers, really, or can be influencers. And how do we promote, how do we support, how do we harness that energy? I think you'll be hearing from some of the Suzuki elders tomorrow. I've seen it in Oak Bay, where I was lucky enough to retire to, and there's a set of volunteers there, many of whom are retired, very smart people, very passionate people, very well-organized people, and they are organizing thousands of people, mostly for free, I will say, as volunteers, to do things like ecological restoration. Oh, it was also really nice to hear the recognition of things like trees and nature and stream corridors and tree canopy and things like that that will help cool and will help save lives. So a lot of that is going on. Some other good examples have been people who have just been working very closely with their community centers or the senior centers to get people out in sort of organized ways. And I'll mention a couple of examples of that really quickly. So I think there's an urgency here that I'm hearing, and I think we all feel, but is often understated or unstated. And so this need to organize others, and particularly I would say sort of the importance of place-based action, place-based organizing the people, reaching people where you live or where they live, because the governments don't really do that very well, and nor should it all be left up to government. We have to do our part. So one example of that we've been experimenting with at UBC for many years now has been the Citizens Toolkit project that we're going to be testing out next week as part of the Cool Hood Champs workshop that we're having next week. If you're interested in that, talk to May. But the Cool Kit is a sort of a set of tools, fun, highly visual guide. There's leaflets at the back if you're interested in those. Do it yourself, but it's most powerful when it's organized by groups and networks. And it sort of gets people out. You do a walk around your block or your street or your apartment building or wherever you live, or indeed your community center, and you're looking at what does climate change mean to me? What have people done? How are we doing? How is our block doing? We did a little block walk about a month ago on my street. I thought I'd better walk the walk, literally, with my neighbors. We got like 30 people out, which is great. And, you're looking at what color are the roofs. Are they pale roofs to cool you, or are they dark roofs? How many people have gas meters? How many people are driving EVs? And you can count these things, and it becomes a little more meaningful, and you find people who have actually done it before. And in our case, we had young people, and we had retirees, and we had middle-aged people as well, all mixed up. And the only reason they're interested in climate action is because it's where they live. They may have very different political views. But it's a way that has sort of, we've seen over time, it does engage people and gives them some fun, positive things to do. The Cool Hood Champs program that May mentioned, that we'll be testing in Langley next Friday, I think, is an example of that. It's a program that we actually ran through community centers in Vancouver for several years. You might want to ask yourselves or your local community center, are you doing climate action training? Are you training elders? Are you training your neighbors how to do climate action? Or can we help organize others who would be interested but maybe don't know how to do it? So we might want to think a bit more about these kind of training programs. And we've just sort of tested one that's carried on in various areas, but there are many other ways to do it. If you're interested in that, there's more information at the back, and we're all happy to talk about it. One more plug I'm going to give quickly. There is a micro-certificate that UBC offers on climate action, community engagement, and climate action, which is really a train-the-trainers program. It's a microcredit for 8 weeks, and it's run every year, and we set it up, and it's built around some of these tools to help people who do want to organize, who do want to get out there and empower others, but maybe lack the tools or experience to do it. So I think I'll finish there and just say that this is empowering to me, and I think to most other people that I've talked with lately, of all generations. And I think this is a great model for intergenerational, well, it's more than education, it is empowerment. So go for it, May. Let's do more of the same. Thank you very much. I'll leave it there.
Thanks so much, Stephen, and thanks so much to our panelists today. So I just want to open up for questions, for discussion, just to get folks out of your seats.
Thank you so much, everyone. That was an incredible panel. I work with the City of New Westminster, and I have just a two-part question, mostly to kind of raise an issue that there's so many inspiring researchers and folks in the room. One of the biggest intersectional challenges we deal with in US is that our most vulnerable seniors tend to live in the most affordable housing. So we have our 3 to 4 story walk-ups, which were built in the 60s and 70s. Many folks have lived there for 30, 40 years, and they're paying rents that are very low. They happen to be in the oldest, most dangerous buildings. We are thinking about tenant assistance policies, which in some cases will move development pressure from those units, but that just means that these older buildings are staying there. So these buildings are intergenerational. They have a large proportion of seniors, but I think research around easy retrofits, really centering these buildings from affordability, seniors' perspective as well, is something that I'm very passionate about. The second part question is, I did my master's at SFU in the Resource Environmental Management program, and I see so much overlap with gerontology. And the book that I read that was most inspiring to me was called Don't Be Such a Scientist. It was about 20 years old, but it talked about communication as either getting at your brain, which I think science does well. You know, we talk about the hockey stick graph and exponential carbon, and then there's a heart, and sometimes the loins, which is Hollywood, you know, love, and then there's the gut. And the oil and gas industry really is good at communicating to the gut. So if you see a big truck, a Ram Dodge, it's usually someone washing their hands after a hard day's work, and it says, you're a provider to your family. It doesn't talk about gas prices, carbon dioxide, any of that stuff. It just talks about being a provider. So I think that's an area here that I see very powerful, is getting to that gut communication of the work we're doing, the importance of what it feels like to walk in the forest. Because car commercials are doing it really well, so how do we really build upon that, communicate to the gut rather than just the brain, which I think we're going towards.
Thanks so much. So any reflections from the panelists? Go, Tobias.
Music, my ears.
Music's a powerful thing too.
What about Dana? Do you work in the city of New West for a bit?
Hopefully, not yet. But I'm sort of looking at inclusivity, and I'm working alongside the city of New West, mainly looking at how can we connect people that use public and active transportation modes to community centers. So yeah, it's quite interesting that I think it's good that the city is picking up projects like these and sort of focusing them down, because people need that sort of the social help. I know that Shreya, you were looking at something like that within social housing, and how like I did a couple of like walks through this social infrastructure with her, and it kind of feels like people are giving up hope because they're like, this is life now. I sort of have to, like, I don't have the money to maybe put into the place that I'm living, or the place isn't mine, so I can't put money into it, or I don't have any resources to do that. And so I think it's good that the city is sort of looking at stuff like that. Not too many cities are doing that. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, Stephen here.
Just to the point about the oil and gas brilliance in advertising and promotion, I completely agree. And I think we probably could be more intelligent, possibly assertive in how we take those kind of approaches. And so one of the things that we've seen to be very powerful are helping people visualize their own future. And that's why we do in the Cooler Champs process, visioning on your street of, well, how would you change this, if you were powerful? And some things you can change. You can plant more trees in your south-facing walls on your own property if you're a single-family home dweller. Not so easy if you're an apartment dweller. Have to work on the landlord a bit. But things like that are visual and real and practical could be much more powerful. And the use of visualizations to give ideas of, oh, you could have this future or you could have that future, or work on the municipality so you make sure you get more of this than of that. But to take your car example, I think is it's a very clever example. One of the things that we had proposed a few years ago, no one took it up for some reason. What if every vehicle had its miles per gallon written in large letters on the side of the car? The only ones you do, it might be useful. No, that's interesting, Would it possibly change those messages, or, it would never get accepted, of course. But you do see increasingly buses and truck. I saw a truck today, which had broken down, unfortunately, but it was an electric truck at the ferry terminal. So you are starting to see that, buses that are green in Victoria and things like that. And why we don't do it on private cars, I don't know.
And we see the T on a Tesla. We see the T on a Tesla go downhill real fast, right? So the thing is, yeah, it works both ways.
It does, yeah.
Yes.
Agnes Jackman, and I live in New Westminster, and I must say the past few months, trees have been going up all over the place. My dog's really enjoying his walks more these days. So I just want to comment on how I really think that seniors, older people, undersell themselves in what they think their influence can be. And I was mentioning to Mr. Wister that I had an example of that the other day myself, where I realized that I have more influence than I thought I had with my grandchildren. I went to pick up my granddaughter to take her to circus school, and I was told she'd come out to the car by my son. And I waited and I waited and I waited, and she wasn't appearing. So I went in to investigate and met my very frazzled son in the hall, who told me that my granddaughter, who's 12, and her friend had locked themselves into the bathroom because the friend didn't want my granddaughter going to circus school. They were wanting to be together. And he looked at me and he said, "Do you think you could help?" So I went over to the bathroom, and, it was less than a minute later, I came into the living room with her and her friend, and my son looked at me, he said, "How did you do that?" When she went off to get ready, "How did you do that?" And I said, "Well, I just told her that I didn't have my hearing aids in, and I couldn't hear her through the door, and she opened up the door." So I thought, there, okay. And the solution was I took her and her friend to circus school and then took them out to eat afterwards. So anyhow, yeah. So, I think we do have potential there that we're not using to, help future generations along past the hurdles. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I must admit, I would like to just absolutely endorse that. I mean, I'm a boomer. Like, we have other boomers here, we have lots of boomers out there. And I mean, somebody might correct me on this, but it seems like, our generation probably has seen more changes over our lifetimes than any other generation in history. If we think back to sort of what life was like when we were actually, when we were born. And I think sort of that sort of, the changes that have happened has made us, we've had to be nimble in our thinking, we've had to be adaptable, we've had to be resilient, we've had to adopt change, like it or not. Sort of human beings are human beings. But I think it has made us very creative. So I do think that as a generation, we have a lot to offer. And sort of, and I think, hope that, the younger people would tap into that resource, because I think we can do a lot.
Yes.
My name's Linda Forsyth, and I'm from COSCO, the Council of Seniors, and other organizations. But I guess I'm concerned about, listening to you and thinking about what the problem is around climate, and I become very overwhelmed. It's really big, and I just said to my friend here, if I had my wish to dream, it would be get rid of all the corporations. And he said, try to take on the oil industry. Mm-hmm. So that's the kind of hugeness it is. And I know that starting small is helpful, and I think that maybe it gives us some hope. But I find that when my kids were young, I was the team mom, and then they started playing baseball, and I worked with the team, helping to organize it. And then I got into the community center and was on the board of that, and it goes on. And I kept looking around for more volunteers, and nobody wanted to volunteer, and it was the same group of people who was the team moms and the workers on the baseball field or in the community center was the same people, and they do all the work. And I think it's absolutely fascinating. And I've lived in a co-op, and I've tried to get people in the co-op interested in doing some stuff. And they're not interested. They'll come out to it, and they like to listen to it and hear about it and take away the papers, but they're not going to do anything. And so it's kind of the same group of people that are doing all the work, and I would presume it's this gang that's in here right now that's been doing a lot of the work all their lives. So my question to you guys is, how do we get more people involved? And how do we get them to stop just coming and listening and going away and doing nothing?
I was just gonna say that May is amazing at doing that. Like, I don't know how she does it, but every week it's like, oh, we're organizing this at like this new place. And I think the good part about it is that you're not like expecting people to show up, but you're going to where they are and then getting them intrigued in the process. And that's how we've been here for over a year, almost a year. We've been in this project, and we've sort of stuck together because we're learning while we're doing it. Yes, not everybody is going to stay through and through, and I know that we had some people that dropped out because they were overwhelmed with because it is a serious topic, right? Because it affects us all the time, and they were not able to sort of deal with those emotions, and that's completely valid, I think. But I think the idea is that how can you use your peers to sort of share that load, because we're all, sort of living this together. Like everybody has their own stuff to do. We're all doing things, and I think it's needed to sort of step back and see like where we're going with everything. Like the environment has been kind of the same during my life. Like during my life, it hasn't changed too much. Yes, the atmospheric rivers are sort of every 2 months now, or for me, it's sort of like, okay, one more. But I'm sure that like while some people were growing up, it wasn't that common. So I think just like having the discussions around people, with people, is good enough, because even if they're not sort of contributing back to it, at least they know that it's happening. I guess just the awareness might be a good place to start. But I also think that is kind of everything. Like nobody's showing up to anything except the same people. Everybody's talking about the same thing. How do you get people to show up? And it's sort of a question I have never answered. I do way too much, but yeah, it's sort of the same thing.
If I may, I'd like to say a couple of things about volunteerism as well. It's certainly the backbone of all community organizations, without a doubt. And I think post-COVID, volunteerism, the recruitment, retention, and recognition of volunteers has become more challenging. One of the things we've noticed in the work that we're doing in the Connect Age project, it's a parallel project. It's not addressing climate change per se, but social isolation. Nevertheless, we're working with organizations. So at the organizational level in BC, we have 40 organizations that are part of the study. Some of the people here are part of it. And we're working with those organizations to develop resources to assist them with this recruitment of volunteers and retention, keeping them involved, and so on and so forth. So some of the things that, and I know Erin O'Day here, Dr. O'Day's been one of the leads on that particular part of the project, and feel free to jump in. But I know that we're working on a whole number of things, including posters, including information to assist them from Volunteer Canada and other organizations, having organizations assist each other. Some have a lot of volunteers, some have fewer, some have a bus but not a driver, and so on and so forth, to build capacity. But there's also a number of other things that we're producing. So giving organizations access to those kinds of resources. Many organizations are tremendously underfunded, and they don't even have the time to submit the kinds of grants to New Horizons and so on and so forth in the United Way that they require to get the funds, to get more people to help find volunteers. So it's a bit of a, it's a bit of a circular problem, isn't it? A bit of a paradox, but we can break through. And just one last point, I think we need different approaches for different types of people, and having things like matching volunteers to their skill set is extraordinarily important to keep them interested and engaged. Mm-hmm. And we're finding that the younger generation of volunteers and why they volunteer is very different than the older ones. Younger might be looking to improve their resume and get some experience to help their career path, whereas older adults, quite often, it's more generative or for altruistic reasons. Not that altruism is important for the younger generation as well, but different approaches. Thank you. Oh, yes, please. Melanie.
Further to your point, it's such a good one. I think attitude is everything. Like, I live in a big apartment building, and every 3 weeks, I take a lot of clothing down to Watari, 320 Alexander Street, which is a homeless place. So what I do is that I put a sign up in our laundry room, which we all use, saying, on Tuesday the 5th, I'm going to Watari. If you have any clothing, please leave it at my door. I want it to be clean. If it's been in the bottom of your closet for 2 years, it's not clean. It smells like the worst things in your house. Wash it, iron it, put it in a bag. Every 2 weeks, I get this pile of washed, clean clothing that makes me so proud. And they say, thanks for bringing it. No, pal, it took you a lot longer to wash it, iron it, and get it to the door. So I say thank you. So living in this building and sending that email to my friends twice a year, same thing, wash it, yeah. I bring an avalanche of stuff to that place, and I'm so proud. And last month I said to them, there's probably a little something else I can do. And they said, you know, we're so busy. If you think so, think of something. So I did. I said, now, everyone, give me a book as well as the clothing. And I'm going to start a library there. So last month that started. It's not really a library, like they take the books and that's the end of it. Nobody brings them back. But that's okay. You know, all my friends and people in the building have contributed something. So I think if you do the first step and put a smile on it, and you're, you know, funny about it, like you say, what the hell is this? You didn't wash this. Then they'll wash it. And just be positive, and then you come home again and say, I was so proud to take all the stuff from my building. And when people asked, I said, look, this is all stuff from my building. I didn't even have to go out and look for it. My neighbors want you to have this today. And then whatever the next holiday is, I say, you know, happy Halloween, happy Easter, happy whatever. And I think attitude has so much to do it. There's another person in my building who drags themselves around. Christ, I'm so embarrassed every time a guest comes to Vancouver. They go down and see the Lower East Side, and you know, we've got so much money in this city, nya. So I said, well, do something like I'm doing. I really think attitude is everything.
Thank you, Madeline. I think we have time for one or two more. Okay, you're next.
Yeah.
And then
Sounds good.
I feel like I'm hogging the mic here, but my analogies tend to be a little bit off color, but anyhow, you got to look at organizations who are successful, right? And I'll point out one. That's the Hells Angels, and so they need people to volunteer, basically, to come in and they recognize their people, right? And us as activist organizations, like some people self-identify as activists. I'm one of them, right? I started volunteering when I was 17. There's a lot of people. We have to be able to recognize that, hey, this is one of us, and ask them, like, come out, like, we can have a beer after, like, whichever, right? We got to recognize our people.
it's only water.
Sounds good. Thanks so much for your insights. I was curious if you could speak a little bit more about the sensors in the study and what your hopes are for those. I know Ruth shared that kind of getting used to the sensor was interesting, and I think it's a really interesting medium for blending some of the stories that you're sharing with kind of harder data, which I think is often a challenge, right? That anecdotal data and stories can get dismissed when you go to policy makers and are trying to make changes. So I'm curious if you could speak a little bit about what that experience is like and what your hopes are for how to use the sensors. Thanks so much.
ARG. We're still getting to know each other. It's like living with a science fiction character. When I first got, I live in a small apartment, so it's right in the middle. And I was in the kitchen. I opened a can of tuna to make a tuna sandwich, and about 10 minutes later, I don't know what possessed me to check the sensor, and it had spiked practically abort the building, get out, so polluted. And I'm assuming it was the tuna, because I don't know what else it could have been. It's a little odd living with a sensor. I open the window because it doesn't demand anything of me except fresh air. Does that help? We're still getting to know each other.
Sorry, I wanted to continue Ruth's tuna saga, because in our last meeting, she was like, I have one can left of this specific brand of tuna that she opened the last time. And she's like, I'm going to open this, and then I will tell you when I open this, and we're going to look at the data and see whether it was specifically this kind of tuna. And I was like, I love this. Like, a can of tuna is now a research project. Like you'd never have thought that you could use that as a medium of research.
It didn't work. I did.
I think if there's maybe one last comment.
I'm not sure if the lady's still here, but there was the comment about, you know, how do we capture this stuff? How do we get people to show up and actually do things? And some obviously excellent examples that are out there. We've done quite a bit of research looking into this over the last few years, and there are great precedents that have been scaled up. That haven't been scaled up other than locally, and they're not universally transferred or even regionally. So, you know, there's a 3-year project or a 5-year project, and it works really well, and they organize loads of people, and people get out and they actually do things, but they're very, very hard to sustain, and they usually fall apart. Sometimes they're pilots. The city of Vancouver used to have pilots coming out the wazoo, you know, and 3 years later, they're gone. And that's what happened with the Cool Hood Champs program with the Parks Board. They ran out of money and we didn't do anymore. But there are some great examples. One I would really recommend if you're interested in just community engagement at scale. One of the best I know of is in the UK in Oxfordshire. The Community Action Group Network, which is focused primarily on climate, but also health and social well-being. They are run by a regional district, in effect, a county, and they help fund, they help do grants, they help train community groups, and they've got hundreds and hundreds of neighborhood-based or village-based or very local street-based groups that they support, and they give them guidance and some training and meetings and help them sustain their activities. And that's one of the very few examples I've seen where that's been spread, where it's been, you know, structured and organized. It's social mobilization is what we need, and like some of you guys were talking about, cultural, you know, cultural empowerment and cultural shift that we really need. This is an urgent crisis. It's going to get worse. The question is, how much worse do we want it to get? And how much fun can we have fixing it, or at least fixing it locally where we have a little bit of, we can take back some control. So I think we need to think a lot more about these social mobilization, organizational structures, because every little group can't do it alone. It's not just local governments that need to provide more support, but regional, maybe provincial and national. That's my 2 cents.
Okay, Surya. Last thing. Yeah, this is like mostly from the program perspective, like continuing from here. So one of the best advices, or like actually it would be a caution that I got when I was working on a nonprofit, is like you should be very, very careful with scaling. And also connecting to our first question. So I feel like a lot of the programs and policies, and also with the funding, it comes in that like short period of like 4 or 5 years until like there is a, you know, an election and whatever. But this is more than something that, this is not a short term, it's not like an electoral cycle sort of priority, it should be like a longer priority. So I think that's one place to push for, to make it more embedded in all the action, more intersectional. But also at the same time, there are like lots of creative ways in which smaller communities are doing things. We don't always need to scale it up, but it's more about like how context specific, like what, yeah, it's also like something, May you will read it next week. It's more about like autonomy in adaptation, people having the autonomy and agency in like what are the actions that they can take. So it's not always about scaling up a pilot, but communities having that agency in doing what they want. So yeah, I guess that's it.
Thank you. On behalf of everyone, we're going to have to cut it off here. We're running a little bit over, so sorry. But let's thank May and Stephen and their group for a wonderful presentation.